Relax, I don't have any prepared speech. It's after lunch. About the last thing you need is a prepared speech. But I will show you some pictures of the center I built in Pittsburgh. And I've been doing this for 40 years in one neighborhood. Bidwell Training Center is a vocational school I took over in 1972 in a warehouse with holes in the floor, holes in the roof, and the guys were on their knees gambling at the front door when I showed up in 1972. I didn't recognize the game they were playing, so I asked the secretary. I showed up here, couldn't recognize the game. She said, oh, they were taking bets how long you'd last in the job. That was the student body. My first executive act about the beer and about the paint. Does anybody didn't show up to paint this building is fired. One guy didn't show up, and I fired him. I said, we're not going to live like this. Somebody in this community has dignity. And I want to find out who it is. So that's where Bidwell started. In a tough neighborhood, crime, dark, isolated. Manchester, I started in 1868. I was a public school kid flunking out of school. And an art teacher named Frank Ross saved my life by getting me excited about clay, so I had a reason to live. And I got pretty good at it. And Mr. Ross says, you're too smart to die. I don't want it on my conscience. You're going to college. And I'm not leaving here until I know you're okay. So Frank hounded me during my senior year until I filled out a college application in pencil. Sent it into the University of Pittsburgh. And they sent me back a letter that says, you got to pass something called the Scholastic Aptitude test to get in here. I never saw the Scholastic Aptitude test. It was multiple choice. I marked it up and flunked the test. So I got into Pitt as a probationary student. Well, I'm very pleased to tell you I graduated from Pitt with honors. Now I'm a trustee of the place. I was the commencement speaker. And I got up in front of 13,000 people and said, don't give up on the poor kids. They might end up being the commencement speaker. That's what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes. I built this training center to teach hope and dignity to people who've been left behind. And it's turned out to be a pretty good story. So Manchester is the arts program I use to work with kids from the public school system. And Bidwell I use to work with adults in need of training and in need of skills. That's what we built. This is my idea of what a training center for poor people is supposed to look like. It happens to be in the toughest neighborhood in Pittsburgh with the highest crime rate, which is my neighborhood. But there's no metal detector and no security cameras. And in 40 years, 28 years in this building, no theft, no drugs, no alcohol, no police calls. Zero. In the toughest neighborhood in Pittsburgh with the highest crime rate. If you guys come to Pittsburgh, remind me to show you my old high school. It's still up the street, 4 blocks away. Steel doors, metal detectors, bars on the windows, and the garbage cans are chained to walls with boat chains. 4 blocks from this building. Same neighborhood. Same kids. Environment drives behavior. Beautiful environments create beautiful kids. Prisons create prisoners. That's the entrance to the building. We have fabulous artwork throughout the building. It's all my taste. Because I raised all the money. I said to my board, when y'all raise the money, we'll put your taste on the wall. But we have quilts and clay and calligraphy, and everywhere your eye turns, there's something beautiful looking back at you. That's quite deliberate. Because what we learned is environment drives behavior. Beautiful environments create beautiful kids. Prisons create prisoners. We've been in this building for 28 years. No act of vandalism, no theft, no drugs, no alcohol, nothing. That's not luck. That's called strategy. That's at Christmas time. This is what we think a school during the holidays ought to look like. We celebrate life, and guess what? The kids want to be a part of that. You have to look like the solution and not the problem, particularly you people in the arts. You have an obligation to show what you believe, not just for the kids, but for yourself. Because hope is very much bound up with what we all do in the arts. And I believe it's important for you to live it, not just preach it. So at Christmas time, when the poor kids, black, Hispanic, poor white, the unemployed adults come to this place, that's what they see when they walk in the front door. And it affects their mood, and it affects their performance, and it affects their hope. We're in the business of manufacturing hope through the vehicle of the arts and vocational education. And there's no sort of way to do this. You either do it or you don't do it. That's our board table. I commissioned a Japanese cabinet maker to do 60 pieces of furniture for a school. Hired the guy from Kyoto, Japan. In the old days, Bidwell was a building trades program, and this lady went to Japan, married this guy, right back to Pittsburgh, and she called me up and says, I understand you teach carpentry. My husband's a woodworker. I was wondering if you give him a job. Well, he didn't speak in English. You can imagine how much Japanese I speak. But I found out he had studied with George Nakashima, who was one of the great Japanese-American woodworkers. I said, tell your husband I'm going to give him a job. And she did, and he stood up and bowed and said, please tell Mr. Strickland, I'm so grateful for the job, but I apologize that my English is so poor. I said, well, tell your husband the students he's going to work with don't speak English either, so they ought to get along fine. And I hired the guy, and he made 60 pieces of furniture for our school. We've since spun him off into his own business. He has a year waiting list doing furniture for rich folks. That's our kitchen. We believe in good food for everybody, not just rich kids. We serve a gourmet lunch every day for our students. Good for the stomach, good for the heads. No fast food is ever done at the facility, and it's worked out pretty good. That's an amphitheater we built for the students. We bring in chefs from all over the world who do product presentations at our school, and it's worked out fine. They're all in uniform, as you can see, because we created a professional environment for the students to work in. If you want to solve poverty, you have to look like the solution and not the problem. The program's 10 months in length. They go to work for 3- and 4-star hotels, high-end restaurants. They get very good at this stuff in a very short period of time. That's our pastry department. No fast food is ever done at the center. Not just because it's lousy food, but it's a lousy value system. And if people tell you that you can't serve poor people gourmet food, send them to Pittsburgh. I've been doing it for 25 years. You just have to want to do it bad enough. And there's no financial difference really between gourmet food and fast food. What's different is the values and the attitude. That's lunch at the school. Just like the lunch is at your center, right? Yeah, well, that's what we feed students every day. Because we've noticed that the food and the presentation affects their spirit. So if you affect the spirit, they perform better. And I've asked this question of every public school administrator that's ever come to visit my center. Why can't you serve food like that in every school in this country? And nobody's given me a good answer as to why you can't do it. This costs just about the same as the average lunch in the average school. But you have to want to do it. That's the big deal. That's what welfare moms are doing after 6 months in the program with no background in food presentation. So nobody can tell me that poor people have to be functioning at the level that they are, because they don't. If you change the environment, you change values. You change values, you change performance. That's lunch. One of the, reminds you of your high school cafeteria days, right? That's what you used to eat in your high school. Well, that's what we eat in our school. So one of the cool parts of working at this place is you eat pretty good. And that's dessert. And these are welfare folks doing this stuff, who supposedly have no ability, no sensitivity, no values. Well, that's what they're doing in 6 months. You tell me. That's one of our guys. That's Chef Keith. He teaches production cooking. That's our dining room. We do a lot of black tie functions at the school, Medical Association, Engineer Society. And one of my goals in life is to change the picture that comes into your head about the inner city to that picture. This is going on in a tough inner city neighborhood with a high crime rate, but not in our center. So it's worked out pretty good in terms of presenting a value and a vision of how life can be within the inner city. We train pharmaceutical techs for the pharmacy industry. You come to Pittsburgh, I'll show you folks doing pharmaceutical applications 6 months into the program with no background in science. What we've learned is that you build beautiful environments, you get performance. You want to teach people technology, build a technology environment. Give them good food and beautiful surroundings, and you can solve the technology problem every day. Some of our students. These guys get pretty good at this stuff. Most of the healthcare facilities, hospitals, and pharmacies hire our students. Probably every CVS or Rite Aid in Pittsburgh has at least one of our students working. And they make a decent wage, they have a place to go, and it works out fine. This guy's now working for the Water Treatment Authority. He went from unemployment to about $50,000 a year in 12 months, doing chemical applications. And he's fine. He's off and running. He's doing a great job. And they didn't hire him because he was black. They hired him because he was a good chemical technician. And that's where we live, is in that space. You give me the tools, I'll bypass the affirmative action department and go to the guy that's running the company, and he'll hire our guys because they're good at what they do. Look at the equations on the board. These are poor folks doing this stuff who supposedly don't know anything about technology. Well, where'd that come from? So we now know that we can take folks who are really disadvantaged and turn them into pretty good technicians in about 12 months. And they can go to work, and they can stay there. We have 60 research techs working for the Bayer Chemical Company in Pittsburgh today, over the last 20 years. Not one of them's been fired, to my knowledge. So we got that problem figured out. And we train medical coders and medical billing folks for the medical industry. 2 of our students. And this is our library. I have students, unfortunately, who are in that library with high school diplomas that they can't read. Not one of them, I got a few of them. And we're going to lose our country. We are losing our country if kids are walking the street with diplomas that they can't read. But there's an answer, and please understand, I'm a big advocate for public education. I'm a public school kid, remember? But we got to change the outcomes. And I think that there are good teachers and good administrators who can be a part of this conversation. So I am pounding the table saying more performance for the people in public schools. God bless the charter guys, God bless the for-profit guys. That's fine. But we can't walk away from the schools, or we're literally walking away from this country. So I'm one of the guys that's promoting partnerships with the school system. This is the arts program. Remember I'm the black guy from the 60s making pottery? How many of you are even around in the 60s? Raise your hand. That's cool. Well, one time nobody raised their hand. So I have to check out who I'm talking to. The jokes don't work. I was around during the disturbances. Back then we called them what they were. They were riots, and guys were getting shot, and I wanted to help out. So I started a pottery program for kids in the streets during the 60s and started working with these kids for free, lived upstairs in a sleeping bag, had wheels in the basement, and I started hearing back from the school that the kids were starting to show up at school more regularly. And after a couple of years, I figured it out. There wasn't anything wrong with the kids. The kids needed clay and somebody to believe in them. And that's where Manchester Craftsman's Guild came from. So I got incorporated in '71, and we've been doing this ever since with clay, photography, and digital imaging. So we do clay. We have great facilities. Oh, by the way, we graduated 99% of the kids last year from a school system with a 50% dropout rate, same kids. I've averaged 90% for 20 years in a row. Nothing wrong with the kids. It's the environment that drives the outcomes. This guy's on his way to Penn State. His brother's already there. We had him 3 years ago. It's all kids' work. These are all the guys who supposedly have no ability or no talent. Artistic aptitude, whatever that is not a requirement to get into the program. Any kid that scratches their head during the presentation is in the program. So get your mother signed a piece of paper that says you can get on a school bus, you're good to go. We lose about 20% of the kids in the first 30 days when they discover it's not an adult daycare center. So an arts program saves your life. But most of those guys stay, most of them graduate, and they do pretty well. 5 of my faculty are former kids who went through the program, went to college, and are back teaching at the center that saved their life. I have 3 PhDs that I know about who came through this place. So we do clay. This is the piece the kids did for the school during a workshop. Look at that kid's eyes. Look at his eyes. That's a child that's engaged in learning something in our center. When I go to schools, the first thing I do, I look at the kids' eyes. Unfortunately, a lot of them are looking out the window or at each other, but they ain't looking at a book. Look at his eyes. And this is voluntary, and it's after school. Look at his face. So what we've been able to do is to create a very pristine learning environment that kids are engaged in coming to. If kids are excited about the spaces that they're in, you can teach them something. If they want to be there, you can't teach them anything. So I came up with this idea, why don't we build a center that's so hip, and so cool with such great food and plenty of sunlight and see what happens. There's nothing else is working. And now I'm giving talks to people in San Diego about my great genius and figuring out common sense, which is all this is, by the way. Everything I'm telling you doesn't require a PhD. It requires common sense. Kids are hungry, you give them something to eat. You're in a lousy building, you put them in a beautiful building. People tell them they can't learn, you tell them they can learn. And you do that long enough, and you mean it, you get outcomes. Do photography. The kid who took that picture is working for Walt Disney Studios. That's the gallery for the kids and the instructors. This is how we present the kids' work. The whole idea is to let these kids know that they have value. So we present the work like that. We have formal food presentation that goes with the work. So you eat smoked salmon at the art opening. Museum quality invitation. And the whole idea is to let these kids know they're exhibiting at one of the best galleries in the United States of America. It just happens to be in their neighborhood. I even got their parents coming. We couldn't get a parent to come 15 years ago, so one of my buddies got off into saving souls for Jesus, you know, dragging guys out of bars with a Bible and all that kind of stuff. I said, I want you to come work for me, tone down the Jesus stuff, but keep the enthusiasm. I can't get the parents to come. So we start picking up the parents. 10, 20, last show, 300 parents. And we didn't pick up one parent. Because now it's not cool not to show up, support your kids at the Manchester Craftsman's Guild. People think you're a lousy parent. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, don't make any difference. Mothers will go where their kids are being nurtured every day of the week. She's an instructor. She's a student. This guy's the director, Jermaine Watkins. I started with him in 7th grade. He's now the director of the center of photography, and he's doing great. This is an old slide for all you techie guys. In the old days, I had a slide projector in a box of slides, and I got called out to the Silicon Valley. So I showed up with a slide projector. These people looked at me like I was from Pluto, man. That's cool. I blew off the dust, plugged in my little slide projector. And the lady came out, she said, boy, that was a hell of a story. My only criticism is your computers are getting a little old. Well, I know how tech guys. So what do you do for a living? She said, oh, I run a company called Hewlett Packard. I said, well, my dear, there's an instantaneous solution to this problem. And we got $750,000 from HP and a systems engineer to go with it. And we put kids into the Rhode Island School of Design in Pratt, right out of the Imaging Center. But I keep this slide in here for nostalgia reasons, and you never know when an Apple representative might be in the audience. This is what HP built. This is called a classroom. You build that, you solve your problem. So why can't every classroom in the United States of America look like this? We got the funding. We just have to use it the right way. I also stuck a music hall on the north end of the building. I'm very glad I did. Because a trumpet player named Dizzy Gillespie showed up. And I said to Dizzy, why would you come to a black-run school in the middle of the inner city of Pittsburgh that doesn't even have a reputation in music? He said, Billy Taylor told me a black guy built this thing, and I didn't believe and wanted to see for myself. And back then, I had time to do all the tours, so I gave Dizzy a tour. At the end of the tour, he said, holy smokes, man, you got to build one of these things in every city in this country, and I'm going to help you do it. I said, well, you came here, that's cool. He said, no, I'm going to allow you to record the concert. I'm going to give you the rights to the music, which you did. Then a piano player named Herbie Hancock dropped by, and then Wynton Marsalis, and then Branford Marsalis will be there this Friday, his brother. Ellis Marsalis, who's the dad, who's a hell of a piano player, by the way. The Basie Band, Tito Puente, Shirley Horn, Betty Carter, Nancy Wilson, Dakota State, all of them. We now have 600 recordings. Y'all ever heard of the Grammy Awards? Well, we won 6 Grammys. So we're the hot young jazz label in the United States of America, MCG Jazz, in the middle of a black neighborhood with a high crime rate. So nobody can tell me that you can't have life under difficult circumstances. You can, you just have to want to do it bad enough. Look at these children. We bring them from the school to what we call a jazz presentation or a concert. Look at their faces, man. The only problem is the kids go from looking like that to going back to school. So they go from excited to despondent. So I'm advancing a new concept. Why don't we start building schools that are so cool that the kids want to smile when they go there in the morning? If they're coming to my school smiling, and I don't have a degree in education, what's the excuse? Why can't we live like this every day? And so far, it's worked out pretty good. Those kids, they're excited about being alive. If you can get them excited about being alive, you can teach them something. There he is, just in case you thought I was lying, he was there. That's a guy named Pat Metheny. Pretty good guitar player. Those are 5 of the 6 Grammys. We won back-to-back Grammys with Nancy Wilson. That's our 5-point surround sound recording studio. And that's on opening night. If you'd have dropped a bomb in that room, you'd have wiped out all the rich people in Pennsylvania. They're all sitting there. Along with my mom and dad. They're right there, 3rd row. They're both now deceased, but they lived long enough to see their kid build a center in the neighborhood and open it up black tie. The next night I had the neighborhood come in, had the same food both nights, because I wanted to establish the principle you don't have to have a tuxedo on to be treated with dignity. And so for 22 years we've been doing concerts, have never had one act of vandalism or theft, ever, 22 years. And usually the concerts are sold out. This was burned out during the riots. So I had another box built, I hit the streets, and I built that. That's a medical technology building, which our center owns. So the little old Manchester Craftsman's Guild is now in the real estate business. And it's one way that we can shore up our bottom line. Because now we got assets on the books. And we rented this out to the medical center, that one. They took the 3rd and 4th floor for their billing operation. That generated lots of money. So we have this fabulous asset that sits in our books in that neighborhood. And we put a bank in there. And we built a greenhouse. We got into orchids because a guy brought an orchid over to my house a couple years ago, and I said, wow, that's cool. So I started visiting greenhouses. You know, orchids for beginners kind of thing. And after the first couple of visits, I said, that ain't that big a deal. I can do that. So I generated $6 million, built a greenhouse. And we teach welfare moms and unemployed individuals how to grow orchids, which we sell in the grocery stores, generate money, support the center. Those orchids. We also took 1st and 2nd prize in the orchid symposium. We beat out all the orchid guys. And that's worked out pretty good. We're doing hydrangeas. Those orchids. And now we're doing hydrangeas, which we sell at the grocery stores. And now we're doing poinsettias. We worked a deal out with the zoo. So we created a Polar Branch poinsettia, split the proceeds with the zoo. We sold every poinsettia last year. So we're going to come back and do that again this year. But the idea is that you creative people, you're supposed to be in the revitalization of the community business, not just the arts. That's my point. And we took 1st prize in the home and garden show. Beat out Miracle Grow and all of them. Now I'm down to the end of the story. You know, when I was out there at the Silicon Valley, this young guy came out of the audience. He said, wow, that's the story. Tennis shoes, blue jeans, T-shirt. I said, cool, man. What are you into? He said, oh, I built a company called eBay. I said, oh, great. Remember, I ain't the techie guy. I didn't know what the hell eBay was. So he gave me his card. I went back to Pittsburgh, asked one of the little techie kids. I said, have you ever heard of something called eBay? He said, yeah, Mr. Strickland, that's the Electronic Commerce Network. I said, holy smokes, I met the guy that built the company. So I called him up. I said, Mr. Skull, I've come to have a much deeper appreciation of who you are, man. He said, I thought you'd figure it out sooner or later. It was $500,000. I said, what's that for? He says, your first replication. Jeff Skull said, I think, Dizzy was right, I think you can scale this thing. And that was the first idea that came into my mind about taking it to scale. So since I met Jeff, these centers are all open and operating. Now, it's not a franchise. We don't own the centers. I don't want to own the centers. What I want to do is get them set up. They're owned locally. But they're in partnership with existing nonprofits. We specialize in a group of people that everybody's running away from. At-risk kids, welfare mothers, homeless folks. Most of the colleges and most of the for-profit schools want nothing to do with these guys. Well, that's my market. I specialize in those people specifically. And we've got some great stories to tell. So Boston, Buffalo, Cleveland, New Haven, Brockway, Cincy, Grand Rapids, and Frisco are all open and operating. This is the space in Frisco before it was fixed up. It's called the Bayview Center for Arts and Technology. They're on their 10th year. This is their 10th year. There's Jeff, Mr. eBay, Billy Wong, and the kids doing digital imaging and video. That's the space. Every center has beautiful space, or we simply will not build it. You have to look like the solution, not the problem. So when the kids walk into this space, they know whatever we're doing, we're pretty serious about it. Steelcase is our corporate partner, the furniture guys. They discount the furniture 60%. So every center is Steelcase. They donate the design. It's a good story. Those kids are not losers. Those kids are winners. Look at their faces. For an after-school video program in the toughest neighborhood in San Francisco. This is Cincinnati. We cut the dropout rate in Cincinnati to 6% in 24 months. And I don't live in Cincinnati. I live in Pittsburgh. It's the value proposition. This is the space, the gallery, the students. That's a digital imaging center for the kids. They turned this into a business doing murals around Cincinnati for profit. This is when we opened up in Grand Rapids. I'm going up in 2 weeks to celebrate their 10th year. So all of our guys who are open have made the cut. They're all still here. And none of them have a deficit to my knowledge. So it's worked out pretty good. The guy that built this one died about 7, 8 years ago. His name was Jim Welsh. He was one of the heirs to the Steelcase fortune. And he came to Pittsburgh a number of years ago and said, I believe this is an expression of God in this center in Pittsburgh, and I want to build one. So he did, man. And he called me about 7 years ago from the Anderson Cancer Center. He said, I have a virulent form of leukemia, and I don't think I'm going to make it. If I don't make it, tell the people the things I was proudest of in life were my family and the center I built for poor people who had no chance. Now, it's one thing for me to stand up here and talk about my undying love for the poor. I'm planning to be around a while. When you're down your last 3 weeks, you can believe it. And this is what Jim built. That space. Those are photographs of Dr. King taken during the last 2 years of his life until he was killed. Mrs. King actually saw the photographs before she died and approved of them. That's the dining room for the students. We cut the dropout rate in Grand Rapids to 5% in less than 3 years. Western Michigan Center, gallery. We do photography. These are some of the kids. One of the ways that we now know that the program is taking effect on the kids, they start pulling their pants up. These used to be called welfare moms. They're not welfare mothers. They were welfare mothers. Welfare is a state of mind, not just an economic condition. These guys are pharmaceutical technicians. They're working for the DeVos medical system in downtown Grand Rapids. They can feed their kids and they're out of poverty. Done. Cleveland, these are the kids. We saw kids get off the bus for the first time. They walked away from the center because they thought they got off at the wrong stop. They couldn't conceive that something this beautiful was for them. That's how backwards this thing's gotten. Those kids. He records with Alicia Keys. He developed a recording program. Phlebotomy, first class. This is the space we built. 80% went to work for the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital, first class. This is New Haven. It's been open. This is their 3rd year. They're doing pretty good. Looks just like that picture. And they've just announced yesterday they're going into culinary in a big way. This is Boston, which is recently opened. That's the space we built. She's a graduate. All these people went to work, and half of them had criminal records. So we've been able to crack through with the law enforcement population, and we've worked these folks into a program in spite of their backgrounds, and they're doing okay. One guy he was in jail for, I think, 18 years, and he's in the program, and he's doing fine. He's got a job. Last I heard, he's doing okay. This is the one we opened up in Brockway, Pennsylvania. Have y'all ever heard of Punxsutawney Phil? Well, that's where he lives. 2 hours north of Pittsburgh, up in the rainforest. Not a rainforest. Technically, it's a forest preserve. And the Republican leader of that area had heard about my center, came to Pittsburgh and fell in love with it, and said, let's build one in Brockway. Well, we did. This is the 2nd year. We graduated every student, and they all got jobs. 100% first class in Brockway, Pennsylvania, man. So now we have a rural center to our credit. That kid in the black, that's Marco. He's the director of the Clay program. I had Marco in 8th grade in Pittsburgh Public Schools. Dave Diley in the middle is the director in Manchester. He was a kid in high school. And it's a great story. Richmond, Charlotte, St. Croix, Vancouver. Now, Richmond's on hold. Charlotte's on hold. St. Croix's moving forward. Vancouver's moving forward. Atlanta, Chicago, and Sharon. Sharon is now teed up. We just raised $2.5 million. Construction starts in the next 60 days. Chicago has been fully funded. It starts next week. Just picked the architect. And Atlanta's on its way. So these guys are, I think, going to be teed up. And now got Denver, and we've got Los Angeles, and Seattle, Tacoma have just signed up. And these are places we're talking to. Not pushing, just if people express an interest, we put them on the list. And I was just in northern Israel 2 weeks ago, and I met with a guy named Shimon Peres, and he loved this idea. I think he read my book, and he said, we got to build these all over the world, basically. So that was very exciting. And we have Jews and Arabs meeting in Akko, in the north, right now. We raised $1 million. We're going to start with a culinary program. So we'll have Jews and Arabs cooking their cuisine together in this world-class training center, as sure as I'm standing at this podium. If we can pull that off, the rest of the world is downhill from there. But we think it could be a hell of a symbol of reconciliation in the Middle East, because we're building these very small and very quietly. These are Jews and Arabs participating. And I tell you, it's pretty exciting. You know, to get a black guy from the inner city of Pittsburgh with a little arts program talking to Shimon Peres about contributing to the Middle East reconciliation plan as an arts organization, that's pretty interesting. And I think we're going to pull it off. And let me give you one final example of why I do these little presentations. You can turn the lights on now. I got a book I will talk about in a minute. The reason I do these is you never know who's in the audience. And the other reason is I believe in Duluth and what you guys are doing out here. I'm friends. San Diego Community Foundation is good people. I've known them. They do good work. And I think it's really important to keep telling this story no matter how many honorary PhDs you get. The day you stop doing this is the day you're out of business, in my view. I'm one of you guys, basically. What got me into this is what got you into this. What keeps me into this is what keeps you into this. I can think it's fair to say y'all didn't get into this profession to make money, so you must have got into it for a different reason. Probably just like me, because you love the arts. And you love life and you want to help people, man. All right, me too. So that's why I'm in this. And it's really good to be with guys like you because you remind me that my life is making sense. And I'm reminding you that your life makes sense, even though it's very hard. Because I know how hard y'all fight for money. First, you know, the arts programs are always last in. It's ridiculous. And it's also potentially fatal for any community that cuts off its cultural roots. The tree can't last. And I don't know what your opinion are about the football teams, but I think we'll get a lot more betting on you guys than we will on the football team. For real. For a lot less money, by the way. And, you know, you never know who you're going to run into. So 6 months ago, I get a call. Deluge doesn't know this story. It didn't exist when I was out here last time. I get this call from Mr. Sarowitz. And Johan King, my executive assistant, called and said, Mr. Sarowitz wants to talk to you, and he's in a hurry. I said, well, who the hell is this guy? He said, I don't know. He just called you, wants to talk to you. I said, well, take a message. I'll call him back. He said, Bill, this guy's agitated. Take a message. I'll call him back. 3 hours later, I hadn't called him back. Mr. Sarowitz is on the phone. He wants to talk to you, man, and he ain't hanging up. Okay, fine. Mr. Sarowitz, how can I help you? Are you still doing that work you were doing in Pittsburgh that you told me about 5 years ago at the Inc. magazine conference when you were the keynote speaker? I said, yeah. He said, well, I was blown away, and I told you at the end of that presentation, if I ever got any money, I was going to give you some of it. I said, well, cool, man. I hope it all works out for you. He said, well, I'm doing something called an IPO from a company next week, and I think it may be successful, and if so, I'll call you back. Click. Good, God bless. Good luck. He calls back the following week and says, it was successful. How much does a center cost? I said, well, to plan it and the feasibility, a couple years operation, you can do it for $5 million. He says, well, I'll take one. Which he did. He just transferred $4.7 million into our account yesterday before I left Pittsburgh. We got a director, we got a board, and we're going to build this thing in South Chicago. For real. But he said, weren't you trying to do something in Israel? I said, yeah, man, I've been going over a couple times. No traction. He said, well, where do you want to build? I said, up north, where the Jews and the Arabs are getting along, and have been for a long time. He said, well, I think there's a reason why I was told to call you from a spiritual source of great power. I'm going to go with you if you allow me to go. Well, Steve went with me. And we had the Jewish kids and the Arab kids sitting there in the basement. I'm talking. And Steve and his wife committed $1 million on the spot. They transferred the money last week and added $300,000 to it last night. So we're going to build a culinary program in Israel. For real. One guy and his wife, who just happen to be good people, who've decided that it ain't about buying more cars or bigger houses. It's about trying to change the world and making it a better place for people. So they're involved. Steve's going to be on my national board. Jeff Scull, of course, is involved. And we're running, guys. We're running at this thing. And you never know. I think this is going to continue to be a very interesting story. My hope is that in coming, one, to encourage you guys to continue to do what you do, but you never know where your next center is going to come from. So if you keep throwing out the seeds, eventually one of them will sprout. And if it doesn't happen here, but somebody else does it, cool. My job is to stop this insanity. We're losing the country, man. Oh, by the way, I showed you the cure for terrorism today. That's it. It's not military. I mean, you need to shoot them guys. I agree with that part. I'm not that much of a liberal. But while you're shooting them, invest in programs like this so we can create kids who want to live as opposed to kids who want to die. Terrorists don't want to live. My kids want to live, man. I gave them a reason to live. You solve that problem, you solve your terrorism problem. It's going to take a while, but I can tell you I'm standing up here, and I had Jews and Arabs talking to each other for real without a diplomacy course. And I got them coming to Pittsburgh in March. So we got it teed up. So thanks for being polite and listening to what I had to say today. Sure.
So do we have a couple of is this working? There we go. Do we have any questions for Bill before we wrap up? We're at 1:30, but if anything inspired you or you got intrigued by. Question in the far back.
Most of the faculty are arts folks who've gotten good at their craft and have a degree in something. The vocational people are usually from industry, like a pharmacist who's semi-retired, who work for industry, will come and teach the course. So these are all pretty much practitioners from the field. We do not have social workers, and we technically don't have counselors. Really, the faculty are the counselors, because they work with the kids pretty directly in giving them the kind of information they're going to need to get through high school, go to college, get a job interview, whatever. So it's very high touch and very high value. And over time, the kids get it, and the adults get it. Anybody else? Man. Okay, shoot. Basically, a group of folks, sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's five, come to Pittsburgh and spend a day with us. So if you guys are interested, I'm going to put this on Deluge's plate. Get a group and come to Pittsburgh. I don't care how many. Even if you don't build a center, you still ought to come because it's really a cool place. And the kids, are meeting people now from all over the world. And don't think they don't know it, because they do know it. So that's the thing you can do. Come spend a day with us, and out of that we give you a couple of homework assignments. One of which is go find some rich people. Because unfortunately we need them. But I'm like one of them, what do they call them divining rods? Whenever I'm in the presence of rich people, I start to vibrate at a certain frequency. So I know how to find them, man. Yeah. Both. It's thousands of people now. There's not a day that goes by in Pittsburgh where I have not met a graduate working or whatever from our center. Not one day. I get on go to a hotel. The Fairmont just built a place. The head guy, Mayor D, comes out and says, "Thank you." I said, "What are you thanking me for?" He said, "I'm one of your culinary people. I graduated 5 years ago." One guy came out from the same hotel. He was with me when I got the award from Hillary Clinton. He's now running the hotel, all the food and beverage. They're there. They're there. It's really cool to be around long enough to see that kind of a legacy take hold. And the best news of all is I've teed it up for the next generation. I've picked my successor for Manchester Bidwell, and I've picked my successor to run the replication division. So I'm going to become something chairman or whatever. And they'll print me another card, and I'm just going to hang around and offer advice and raise money, which is basically what I'm pretty good at, and then play it out and see how many centers we can get built. My end game is 200 centers. That's what I'd like to be able to achieve. If I never build one more, I got these open, I'm cool. But I'm going to play it out, see where it takes me. Yeah?
I'm interested in the fact of what you're talking about, and then yet the center is still in one of the worst neighborhoods
Yes.
in the city. How do you feel the ripple effect is
Well,
in the city?
This particular place has now become the high rent district. It's the classic artist syndrome. We all go into some funky part of the city, fix it up, knock some holes in the roof, put in skylights. It gets gentrified and we get kicked out because we can't afford to live there anymore. Well, this time I got smarter. I started putting on options on all the properties before I started fixing it up. So we're pretty well positioned now. And I'm trying to buy the whole industrial park where we're located, which is 17 acres that goes right to the riverfront. It would be the largest real estate development run by a community-based nonprofit in the United States of America. And I'm that close to getting my hands on it. So part of what I'm saying is you must be prepared to act on your dreams just in case they do come true.
Just to give some context, Bill, you've been doing this for a long time. And so when you founded the organization to when you built this beautiful facility in Pittsburgh, how long was it?
42 years.
Well, no, but when you first built...
Oh, the center I just showed you.
Yeah.
That's 28 years old.
Yeah, so it's a marathon.
Oh, yeah.
It takes time. It takes...
If you don't want
It
to...
sounds like you're just raising money left and right, but it took you a long time and a lot of...
No, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. You got to look at the base. I can, sometime I'll come back out here, tell you about all the layoffs I had to make at Christmas time and the payrolls I missed. There were a few of them. You know, when you're laying off some of your best friends at Christmas time because you don't have any money to pay them, then we find out what you're made of. It's easy to step here and talk now. You know, payroll's doing all right for now. I got some reputation, whatever. At Christmas time, and it's dark, and you got nowhere to go, man, that's when we find out what you're really all about. But oftentimes, you find out where your friends are also. And you're building value more than you know by your work. There are a lot of people in this community who are very aware of what you're doing. And that's a good thing. You have great ambassadors. This orchestra program he's doing is legendary around the country. So there's a lot going on. It's all good, believe me. Yeah.
Earlier today you had said to ask me about your state strategy.
Yeah. Well, the short version of the state strategy is, the short version of the state strategy is, when you come to Pittsburgh, I'll show you a picture of my buddy Jesse Fife. I lost him 4 years ago. He was my co-pilot. And the only thing sad about his departure was I lost him, but two, he wasn't around to see us get a line item in the state budget. It took 35 years for one sentence in the state budget. But we got it so far, and I think we're going to keep it. Because I figured out a strategy to become valuable to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and it was not because I love mankind. That ain't going to get you nothing, man. You can forget that. You've got to give people an economic reason why you should survive. It's dog eat dog. There's not enough money. Everybody's fighting over it. So you got to get in line with a story that people believe. It was the Republican leader who put the money in the state budget for us. It was not the Democratic leader. Joe Scarnati, who was a conservative Republican, who came to Pittsburgh and said, wow, could you build one of these in Brockway? I said, where the hell is Brockway? He said, well, it's 2 hours up the street. So Jesse Fife, my buddy, and I got in my little VW Bug, and we drove to Brockway. The only black people I saw in Brockway, Pennsylvania that day were me and Jesse Fife, man. And I'm sitting down there talking to these hard-looking white Republicans in this little town, 8 of them, man. I said, forget the arts. I just want to get out of here with my life. So I'm telling this whole story, and the Republican chairman said, Joe, this guy's onto something, man. This is a hell of an idea. So Scarnati and the other Republican leaders found some money to build the center, and we opened it last year. Joe Scarnati, Bill Strickland. There was a photo show of Dr. King's photographs where we exhibit the photographs whenever we open the center, the ones I showed you, and one was Dr. King's portrait. And I said to Scarnati, this is what he was talking about, man. And Joe said, you know, you're right. He and I were handing out diplomas to poor white folks. Pharmacy, med tech, coding. They all went to work. The arts kids are all engaged. I said, Joe, this is what he was talking about, man. Every one of those guys that we put to work saves the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania $17,000 a year in welfare costs. Every public school kid that graduates saves the Commonwealth $17,000 a year. Do the math. Do the math, man. And now we got an economic reason why you can support this thing. And that is getting some traction. There are 3 Pennsylvania cities talking to us about building centers today. And I didn't go looking for them. They came looking for me. The medical center in Pittsburgh that we have in our building, the guy that runs the medical center is this hard-nosed guy, eats nails for breakfast. And he came over to visit me, not smiling. I wanted to meet him. I'm dragging this guy up and down the hallway. He said, after 20 minutes, he said, fabulous. You got me for as long as you want me. Long and short, we came an hour-and-a-half tour. He said, what the hell you want from me? I said, I want everything from you. He said, well, can you be a little more specific? I said, yeah. He said, well, be in my office and tell me what you want. So I showed up at his office next Tuesday, 3 things. I wanted to build an office complex, and I needed a tenant. You be the tenant. He said, cool, I'll do that. $21 triple net, 10 years, cool, sign him up. I also want to build an endowment like the symphony and the ballet and them guys. I need something called a lead gift. Well, what's that got to do with me? I said, well, maybe you be the lead gift. So he said, how much? I said, $3 million. He said, you got it, which means I should ask for 6, but I thought I'm $3 million ahead of where I was at 45 seconds ago. And now I want to start training technicians for your medical center. He said, brilliant. I was thinking the same thing, 3 for 3. Now he said, now let me tell you why I'm doing this. I'm not a liberal, a conservative Jewish guy, grew up poor in the Bronx. I know your whole story before you got here. Not one time during the whole presentation did you ask my views on race. So I didn't have to pass a test to be associated with you, for which I'm very grateful. Number 2, your facilities are more elegant than my own healthcare facilities. I will never be ashamed being associated with you, because it's obvious you do not believe in poverty more than I do. You said, got that right. And number 3, if you don't mind my being a little more characteristically cynical, every one of them minority kids you showed me, I saw a dollar sign over their head. I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, your kids all go to college, right? I said, yeah. He said, well, that means they're not in my emergency room with bullets in their head. It costs $250,000 a kid to take the bullets out of their head. You're in the healthcare business. The future of healthcare is keeping people out of hospitals, not putting them in hospitals. And you're doing it better than my own emergency room physicians. So I have a reason to keep you around. That was an interesting conversation. I'm now on the board of that medical system, University of Pittsburgh Medical System. And I just did grand rounds with all the residents and the docs last week, same slideshow. And the docs loved it. And a bunch of them are coming to see the center, so we may be opening up a space in the healthcare conversation. That's how I got the line item on the state budget. Okay, thanks.